and those that are on Zoom. Very excited to have Hilary Anderson joining us with USU Extension and Healthy Relationships Utah. I will, just a couple of reminders for those on Zoom, if you'll remain muted. As she asks questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask them or put them in the chat. We'll monitor that. This is also being recorded so that you can watch it later. And then I think that's it. So just a quick bio for Hilary. She received her education from Utah State in Family Consumer Human Development. She currently works as a family life educator for Healthy Relationships Utah and is teaching both in-person and virtual relationship courses. In addition to her work at Utah State, Hilary works at the Family Place, where she manages the abuse prevention education programming taught in schools. She also co-hosts their podcast, The Parents' Place. Working in the field of family life education for over 15 years, Hilary holds a strong belief that knowledge is over. Hold on.
Say knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. There we go. And that learning new skills can change our lives. So we're very excited again. Please welcome Hilary, and I will turn the time over to her.
All right. Thank you guys for letting me be here. Thank you for giving me your lunch period so that I can talk to you about something that I feel so strongly about. I am excited to share this information with you and to tell you a little bit about the power that I have seen through strengthening relationships. Before I do, let me tell you a little bit about Healthy Relationships Utah, because I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't do that. So we are underneath the umbrella of the Extension, and we love Extension, and Extension obviously does a number of different programs to help our state. And so we are just one of those programs that Extension offers. And what we do is we offer free relationship courses throughout the state of Utah. So we have facilitators up north where I am. There is myself and then another facilitator here in Cache County. And then we have facilitators all the way down to sunny St. George, where maybe we wish that we were today, right? to hide from the snow. So we teach a number of different programs. We have parenting courses that we offer. We have classes to help increase the couple relationship and help strengthen the couple relationship. We have classes for single dating individuals as well too. And then we have a step family course for those individuals that are in a step family situation. And then we have other grants that also provide education for our incarcerated individuals in the state, as well as our teens that are in the juvenile justice programs, able to educate them as well too. So we love what we do. We have a very small group of educators, but we are small and mighty at the same time. And we hope to be able to provide this information for many, many years to come, because we know there is benefit from it. There is power from it. And there is no better day to talk about relationships than today on Valentine's Day, right? And so we picked a good topic for today. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Now, I'm not necessarily sure if I'm going to claim to be the expert in all things relationships. So I've brought a few experts from the field, and I use that term loosely, right? Because these are quotes from kids to help describe love and relationships. And I'll be honest, there's a few of them here that aren't too far away. So I'll read them out loud to you. So Leo, age 7, he says, if falling in love is anything like learning how to spell, I don't want to do it. It takes too long, right? Anita, age 6, I'm in favor of love, as long as it doesn't happen when The Simpsons is on television. Regina, age 10, I'm not rushing into being in love. I'm finding 4th grade hard enough. And then Randy, age 8, says, be a good kisser. It might make your wife forget that you never take out the trash. It might help to an extent, Randy, but, right? And then I love this one. If you're unable to see this because it's a little bit unclear. So the assignment on this child's paper that he had to fill in the blank for. It says, what are 3 things you want to do in the future? Number 1, get a girlfriend. Number 2, kiss her. And then number 3, rule the world. It's that simple, right? Step 1, step 2, and step 3. So, let's see. Oh, pardon me, I went 1 slide too far. How many of you guys remember Blockbuster? Right? How many of you guys today could go home and find a VHS in your home or your apartment? Can anyone still do that? Nice. That's fantastic. So, for those of you that have no idea what a Blockbuster is, right, which I'm sure you mostly do, a video rental store, right? Way back in the day when we did not have streaming, that the movies were, at the tip of our fingertips. So there is a town in Bend, Oregon, small town, who has the last remaining Blockbuster location. So as of July 2018, it was the last remaining Blockbuster in the United States. And then as of March 2019, it was the last remaining in the world. I think at this point, it's mostly just a tourist attraction for us 80s and 90s kids, right? That want to go and reminisce and remember our childhood experience. Because that was what we did on a Friday night. That was our Friday night activity. We would get in the car and we would drive down to the Blockbuster. And if it was my husband, we would spend an hour going down each aisle trying to decide what movie we were going to rent. And there was always the picture in the aisle, but behind it was where the actual disc was. And so sometimes you'd see the picture and you'd be like, oh, that's the one that I want. But you'd reach behind and there was nothing, right? And it was so heartbreaking because it was gone. There was a documentary done on this. I believe it's still on Netflix. Really interesting documentary. But as part of one of the interviews, they were interviewing the different owners and CEOs of this Blockbuster because they wanted to find out how they continued to remain in business after all these years. And this is from Ken Tischer, who is the owner of that Blockbuster. This is what he says. This is his answer. He says there's a certain tangible quality to the Blockbuster experience. It's nice to actually go in and interact with people who, when you tell them what type of movie you're looking for, rather than getting an algorithm, you get somebody who has some idea and you can ask a couple of questions. Now, I want to draw your attention to a few different words. This word experience right here, as well as this combination of words, interact with people. The individuals in this town not only go to this Blockbuster to get their movie rental, but they go in to have an interaction. This sweet lady right here, I believe she's the general manager. Her name is Sandy. They call her the Blockbuster mom. She knows everybody in the town. She's connected to that family. So when you walk into that Blockbuster, not only do you leave with a rental, but you leave with a smile, right? You leave with a conversation. You leave with a, how are the kids? How are things going? I hope everything is well. To sum it up, when they were interviewing the CEO, he basically said, they're not only supplying a movie, but they're supplying a relationship. And that's why they're still there. It's funny because I remember we were at a family function a few years ago. And we were trying to decide what to get for dinner and kind of brainstorming all the local restaurants and where we could go to eat. And my nephew, who is in high school, he said, well, just DoorDash it and have it come here. It'll be much easier. And then he proceeded to say the following comment to us. You don't have to leave your house at all anymore these days. It's fantastic. And I thought about that comment and thought about what a disservice that is I don't know about you. I don't feel like I'm that old, but I am the person that still loves going to the movie theater, right? And having that interaction and having that experience. I love to go into the restaurant. I love, and this one's the kicker, to go shopping in a store. I know we don't do that anymore, right? Because I think I love seeing and interacting with the people. There was a study that was conducted. They refer to it as the Harvard Study of Adult Development. Oftentimes it's nicknamed the Harvard Study of Happiness. You may have heard of this study before. So let me give you a little bit of information as to what this study did. So first of all, it's unique in its nature because it is, I believe, the longest study to date of adult life that has ever been done. So they took about close to 800 individuals through this study, and there were two different groups of individuals. The first one being male Harvard sophomores, and then the other group were males from one of the poorest cities in Boston. So you can see that on the outward appearance, these looked like two very different cohorts. And they attempted to answer the question, what does it take to live a long, happy, and healthy life? So not only do we want to live a long period of time, but we want to be happy in doing so, right? So those are really the two things that they put together. And so through this process, through this study, they followed these men through their lives. And they followed up with them. They did interviews. They did questionnaires. They looked into, obviously, how they were doing physically. So they'd look into their medical records. They do blood draws. They do brain scans. And it was interesting because as time progressed, not only were they following these men throughout their life, but they also started to interview their wives and their family, their children as well, too. They wanted to see if there were some commonalities there. I want to show you guys, this is a small portion of a TED Talk from one of the researchers. And in this portion of his TED Talk, he explains what the results were that they found through this study. As you can probably assume, it has something to do with relationships.
So what have we learned? What are the lessons that come from the tens of thousands of pages of information that we've generated on these lives? Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder and harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. We've learned three big lessons about relationships. The first is that social connections are really good for us and that loneliness kills. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected. And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. People who are more isolated than they want to be from others find that they are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely. And the sad fact is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans will report that they're lonely. And we know that you can be lonely in a crowd and you can be lonely in a marriage. So the second big lesson that we learned is that it's not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether or not you're in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of your close relationships that matters. It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really bad for our health. High conflict marriages, for example, without much affection, turn out to be very bad for our health, perhaps worse than getting divorced. And living in the midst of good, warm relationships is protective. Once we had followed our men all the way into their 80s, we wanted to look back at them at midlife and to see if we could predict who was going to grow into a happy, healthy octogenarian and who wasn't. And when we gathered together everything we knew about them at age 50, it wasn't their middle-aged cholesterol levels that predicted how they were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were in their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80.
So I want to highlight to you those 3 points that you brought up. So right here, first and foremost, having social connections is better for our health and well-being. And conversely, loneliness kills. Second, having higher quality close connections is more important for our well-being than the number of connections. Isn't that interesting? Because I feel like we live in a generation that is attempting to tell us the opposite, right? That is attempting to convince us that it's not, it's more about the number of followers that I have on social media than it is the people that I sit down and have an interaction with on a daily basis. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. We work with these incarcerated fathers. And one of the things that they have a really hard time with is the fact that obviously they are, most of the opportunity for them to build that relationship with their children has been cut. Yes, they can still do visits and send letters and do phone calls, but they yearn for the opportunity to be with their kids and to spend that time with them. And so they have a really hard time with this idea of not being around them. And we like to remind them that although you may not be with your child at this time, you will eventually. And when you do, we hope you take advantage of it. But remember that there are other individuals around them at this time as well, too, that are helping to support them. And those people around us, we want to gravitate to them. Those healthy relationships, we want to gravitate to them because we need them. That child needs them at this point. So third, having good relationships is not only good for our bodies, but good for our brains. As it said, that was where that connection lies. That it allows us to live longer, but it allows us to be happy as well, too. I don't know about you, but there were a few lessons that I learned through going through this COVID experience, as I'm sure you did as well, too. And one of them is I need to do a better job of stockpiling my toilet paper, right? Because we had the toilet paper crisis, and I realized that one roll was not going to last my family very long. But B, I realized that I like being around people, especially when that opportunity was taken away from me. It was such an eye-opening experience. I remember this was probably towards the latter end of COVID, where things were starting to open up and people were starting to become more comfortable being around each other. But I remember I was in an aisle at Smith's Marketplace, and I was looking at some of the organizational bins, and this cute dad came up, and you could tell that he was very, very lost. He had no idea what he was supposed to pick up at the store, and he was on the phone with his wife, and she's trying to explain to him specifically what he's supposed to get, and he has no idea. And that's okay. So when he got off the phone, he asked me a few questions, and I gave him some advice on what to do. And when we were done having our conversation, he reached his hand out and he said, "Thank you so much. My name is John." Now, back then, shaking hands was one of those major no-nos that we were not supposed to do, right? But I'm sure that it was just his natural instinct to reach out his hand to say, "Thank you. I appreciate you." And you know what? That handshake, it felt amazing. More amazing than it had felt for a long time because of that connection. So speaking of relationship goals, this is a relationship goal. This is what I aspire to be. These are my grandparents. My grandma has since passed, but Every 3 years, they bring the family together for a family reunion. And when I say bring the family together, I'm not talking a group of 20 individuals. I'm talking close to 150 people that we bring together. My grandpa told me he was a farmer for an occupation, and he did a great job of farming. And so, as he was accumulating his wealth, one of the things that he strategically did is he put some funds aside, and he calls them the reunion fund. And he still has that reunion fund, and that's how he pays for a place for us to stay and food for us to eat, and even accommodations for people when it comes to traveling expenses. Because he said to my family one time, that is the best financial decision I ever made, was to set aside that money so that my family could come together to be with each other. So this is at one of our family reunions. We were having a family dance, and we happened to snap that picture of my grandparents dancing. They live very close to me, so we have the opportunity to spend time with them on a regular basis. And one thing that we like to do is we like to go camping in the summer. And there was one particular year that we were sitting around the campfire and we were talking, and we got on the topic of how he and my grandmother met. And my grandpa proceeded to tell us about their first date. Mind you, he is 90 at this point. So that was probably about 10 years ago. So we're speaking probably around 80. But when we asked about his first date with my grandmother, he could tell us the actual date it was on, what they did, as well as what she was wearing on that day. I don't even remember what I was wearing yesterday, guys. And he can remember from 60 plus years ago that experience that he had. So powerful to me. Now, they had a very traditional courtship. And, as we talked about their experience dating and what they typically would do on a date, I'm assuming you guys would be able to make some very educated guesses on what they did for a date. They went dancing, right? They went to the diner. They went on walks together. But it's interesting because we look at dating today, and it is very different, isn't it? It's a very different situation and a very different experience for single individuals. This article was from the New York Times back in 2013. So we're dating ourselves a little bit here, right? Because this was 10 years ago. But even 10 years ago, here's what it says. The new date is, we've heard this infamous phrase before, hanging out. It's one step below a date and one step above a high five. Dinner at a romantic new bistro, forget it. Women in their 20s these days are lucky to get a last-minute text to tag along. Raised in the age of so-called hookup culture, millennials who are reaching an age where they're starting to think about settling down are subverting the rules of courtship. Instead of dinner and a movie, which seems as obsolete as a rotary phone, they rendezvous over phone text, Facebook posts, instant messages, and other non-dates that are leaving a generation confused about how to land a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's interesting because one of the classes that we offer, like I mentioned earlier, is a class that we call our How to Avoid Falling for a Jerk or Jerkette. It's our dating course that we offer. And that class is filled with information on how to build a healthy relationship, how long it takes, what we want to watch out for, warning signs, things that we want to avoid, how to keep our head and our heart in the game. And I'll talk about a few of those things. But I remember a particular individual. He took the entire class, all 8 hours of the course, and we were saying our goodbyes at the conclusion of the class. And at the very end, he raised his hand and he says, okay, you answered all my questions, but I have one more, all but one. He's like, now where do I go to find that person? Because that's what I'm really struggling with. Is where to go to find that particular person, right? when we're hiding behind dating apps and phone texts, as they say, and Facebook posts, where do I go to find that particular person? It's funny because oftentimes when I tell people that I teach a dating course, they often giggle because they say, why would you need something like that? This is why. Because the rules have changed. Those traditional norms that my grandparents followed are no longer the norms that we follow now. And so the how-to has kind of become unclear. So in our course, we attempt to give our participants the how-to, if you will. I don't know about you. I speak about phones. They're not all bad. They're really good, actually. I am what I like to say is directionally challenged. I am awful at finding places. Someone give me an address and I have zero idea how to get there. So if I ever have to go somewhere new, the first thing I automatically do is I pull up my phone, right? And I type in the GPS, I pull out my GPS, I type in the coordinates, and this beautiful little device here tells me exactly where to go. I love it. I am lost without it. And not only does it tell me where to go, but it usually gives me the best route. It may even also warn me of potential dangers, right? There's a construction zone here. There's a wreck up ahead, so you may want to take a different way. It's beautiful. And then it says at the very end, you made it. You made it to your destination. Congratulations. Well, guys, we like to think that we have a dating GPS as well, too. And this information I'll share, this is from Dr. John Bennett of the Love Thinks Institute. He created what we refer to as the relationship attachment model, RAM for short. And you can see my RAM up there. So there's 5 different connections to the RAM, 5 different bonds, if you will. The first one being know, then trust, rely, commit, and then touch. So when we speak to individuals about how to build a strong relationship, we talk about those 5 different areas. They all play a role in how we get to know someone. They're our roadmap, if you will. And here's the beauty of the roadmap. Just like with the GPS, it tells us where to start. Our RAM tells us where to start as well, too. So we start to build a healthy relationship by getting to know someone. That's first and foremost, right? And the best way to do that, we refer to this concept as the 3 T's: talk, time, and togetherness. Fancy that. We actually have to talk to somebody to get to know someone, right? So we're talking to them. We're talking to them in person. We're talking to them over the phone. We're talking to them through Zoom. We're talking to them through social media. We want to find out all the things. Give us all the information. We want to get to know who this person really is. But that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen over the course of a week or even a month. That takes time. How much time? Well, in our class, we talk about something that we refer to as the 90-day probation period. And that means that it takes 90 days to begin to know someone. Keep in mind, I said a key word there, the word begin. So by 90 days, you're not going to know everything. That takes a lifetime, right? I've been married to my husband for 17 years, and I can honestly tell you that I am still getting to know him. Because we as humans, we change, we evolve, right? So it's a process. But to feel like you've gotten a pretty good grasp of who that person is, give yourself at least 3 months, okay? That 3-month time frame not only allows us to get to know that person, but it also gives us the opportunity to start to identify some patterns and some characteristics. In 90 days, a lot of times we've had maybe a dispute or a conflict, which quite honestly is good because we want to see how that person responds to those things, right? You're going to have some repeated behaviors over a 3-month period of time. So that's why we call that the probation period. So time, talking, but also togetherness. So, for every story that we hear of a success dating online, we have a story that talks about a massive fail, right? So I'm not saying that online dating is bad, but if you choose to take that route, right? And that's how you're building that relationship is through an online platform. At some point, take that relationship and move it to an in-person relationship as well too, because that togetherness component, it allows us to get to know that person on a different level. Okay? So that's the first step in building that relationship, is getting to know. And then we start to build trust when we do that, right? The more we get to know them, the more we start to build that trust in them. Trust is our feelings or beliefs about them. It's our opinion of who they are. Trust and rely go hand in hand, because the more we trust someone, the more we're going to give them opportunities to rely on us and for us to rely on them. As we do that, we start to maintain commitment. And then physical touch is at the end of the ram. Sorry. But it's there strategically for a reason, guys. And in our class, we talk about some of the hormones, the chemicals that go through our brain in a physical relationship. And what happens oftentimes if we put touch before know or commit or trust. So there is strategically a reason why it's here and not here. Have you guys seen the movie, the TV show, The Bachelor? That is a prime example of taking touch and putting it first and moving no to the end. And do most bachelor relationships work out? Not really. There's a reason why. And guys, going back to this GPS system, if I were to take a trip to Salt Lake, I'm going to start in Smithfield, and I'm going to move to Brigham, and then I'm going to go to Layton, and then I'm going to make it to Salt Lake. And then if I'm really smart, I keep going all the way down to sunny St. George, right? And the ram works the same way, right? It's as if no is Smithfield. We're starting here, then we're moving on to Brigham, and then Layton, and then Salt Lake, and then there's sunny St. George in the end. And so when we show this visual to new relationships, potential romantic relationships, honestly, if you were to track it at its finest, it would look something like that. This downward staircase effect. We refer to that concept as the safe zone. And what we mean by that is we mean that no level should ever exceed the previous level. So commit should never be higher than rely. Trust should never be higher than know. That's where we fall into potential traps. We use a quote in this class. We talk to our participants about how we want to have our head and our heart in the game. Part of being involved in a relationship means falling in love. That's the fun part, right? We like that. But as we're falling in love, we want to make sure that we still continue to think clearly. And the best way to do that is to make sure we're following this logical progression. That allows us to fall head over heels for that person, but to do so where we're still able to identify and see warning signs and still make good, clear decisions. We want to follow our heart without losing our mind. Okay? Now, I recognize that some of us are in dating relationships, but some of us are already in romantic relationships, committed relationships, maybe even married. Any of you guys read this quote and think about Ross from Friends? Any of you Friends fans? Right? I'm fine, right? If you're a Friends fan, you read that in Ross's voice with his squeaky little voice. Those words, I'm fine. I have come to learn over time that I hate those words because they are used so often as a blanket statement. Your friend comes up to you, you haven't seen this friend for weeks, and they're like, how are things going? And what do we always say? Oh, I'm fine. Or another one that we use, things are good. What I want to do is I want to look at that friend's eyes and I want to put my hands on their shoulders and I want to say, okay, now describe to me what fine means to you, right? Give me a description of what good looks like. Because I think so often we do that. We're good. We're fine. And when we talk about a healthy relationship, unfortunately, I think sometimes that becomes one of those terms. I'm in a healthy relationship. I'm in a good relationship. Well, what does that look like? Well, it looks like this, right? It looks like my partner and I make sure that we spend talk time together. We're communicating with each other. We're using iMessages. We're allowing each other to ask questions. We trust each other. We're building that trust and respect. We recognize that meeting needs is a very appropriate thing. Needs are good. Having needs doesn't mean that I'm a needy person, but when I meet my partner's needs, it helps to build and strengthen us up. Having a good, healthy relationship means that we're committed to one another, and sometimes that means that we're going to go through tough stuff, and that's okay. It's part of the gig. And when we're in a good relationship, it means that we recognize that physical intimacy is a strong part of that. So when we take a married relationship and we use the RAM, we look at it a little bit differently. When we're talking about dating, we're talking about building. And that's why strategically we use that downward staircase. But with a romantic relationship, a committed married relationship, we're already married. And so at that stage in the game, we talk about maintenance. We talk about how we hope that these 5 areas are already present. And at this point, how do we continue to keep those 5 areas at a high level? How do we continue to stay committed to each other? How do we continue to have a high level of trust? Recognizing that life happens, guys. Life's a doozy. Life likes to throw us a lot of loops and a lot of curveballs, and it's really good at this. And so the funny thing about relationships is there are going to be days where we feel like we're doing really good, right? We're strong, we're committed, but then something happens. One of us becomes sick. One of us loses his job. We have to move. We have a death in the family. We have a new baby. Changes happen. And change can be hard. Change can be really good. But change affects our relationship. You think about it. Giving the example of, let's say, a new baby. New babies are welcomed into our family. That is a reason to celebrate. But when a couple has a new baby, oftentimes that baby, as it should, takes priority. And so we may not have the ability to talk to each other as much as we normally do because we're so focused in. And when we don't have that opportunity to talk to each other like we used to, oftentimes we see that trust start to dip to a degree. We're so busy meeting the needs of that child, we may not be able to meet the needs of each other. And we all know, for those of us that have the experience of having a new baby with your partner, we might as well just toss that last area of the RAM out the window, right? Because usually that's the last thing we're thinking of when we have that new baby in our house. And so you can see, even though that was a change, a good, welcome change, it did affect our relationship. And so that's why we talk about with committed relationships, it's a matter of maintenance. This is what we refer to as the law of relationships. And here's what we mean by this. We mean that it is normal to become imbalanced in our relationship. It's normal for things to dip. It's normal for things to fall from time to time. The danger is not becoming imbalanced, but staying that way. So the danger lies when we know that there's an area that we're lacking in, but we shrug it aside. It's no big deal. It'll work out on its own. That's where the danger falls. Is when we know that, that physical intimacy has kind of taken a vacation and we're like, I'll just get better. It may, but it may not. And it may require that we put in some vigilant effort and work in order to have that. And so our job is to frequently realign. So continue to balance those imbalances. Look at where your relationship is and say, let's set a goal, right? What are we going to do in the next day, week, month to improve? All right. I want you guys to do something for me. I want you to look at this picture and very quickly, and those on Zoom, you guys can do this as well too in the chat. If probably in the chat is easiest. Tell me the first word or words that come to mind when you see this picture. And it can be a descriptive word. It can be something you actually see. What comes to mind? What do you see? Realistic. What else?
Chaos.
Chaos.
That's what I was gonna say. Chaos.
Chaos. Okay. What else?
Messy.
Mess.
Crazy.
Crazy.
I'm just reading them as they come in.
Good. Perfect. Those are the chat options. Good. Any others that you see? Any other words that come to your mind as you see that?
Disorganized.
Disorganized. Okay. Good.
Stress.
Stress. Yes. All right. Here's what I want you to do. You guys have said some great descriptive words, and those are words that we hear quite often when we complete this exercise. Now here's what I want. I want you to look at this picture again. You might need to focus in just a little bit more or put on a different set of lenses in order to do this. But I want you to pull out some of the positive things that you see.
Colorful.
Colorful. What else?
Happy children.
Happy children.
Kids are still alive.
Right? They're surviving. They're good.
Everyone's got clean clothes.
Good. Yes. Kids have clean clothes on.
Togetherness.
Togetherness.
Creativity.
Creativity. I like that.
Plants are alive.
Yeah. They have plants in their home, right? Some beautiful plants.
We got a pet duck.
Who is that? The chat that saw that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, look at that, duck.
You get 100 points if you notice the duck over here. Don't ask me why it's there. I have no idea. But yes, in every class, usually someone will see that at the end and they'll say, is that a duck? And I'm like, I don't know. They have pets, right? Animal lovers. Okay. Any other things you notice?
Fun.
Yeah.
Creativity.
Fun, creativity.
Temporary. Was lovely.
Yeah.
Learning, exploration.
Good.
Patience.
Right? Now, guys, isn't it interesting that when I initially asked you to complete that task, for the most part, the natural progression for us was to look at that picture and to pull out the negative that we saw, right? And we were able to find the positive, but it took us a little bit of time to get to that point. I've seen this picture, obviously, many, many times. And even though I know the point of this exercise, when I see that picture, the first word that comes to my mind still is the word mess, right? I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's a big mess. So specifically talking about relationships, guys, we as human beings, we are 4 times more likely to see the negative over the positive. And that is not our fault. That is how our brain functions. So if you looked at that picture and you pulled out the negative, guess what? You're not alone. Most of us do that. And we can even track that back to like our days of survival, back to the caveman days when we had to, out of necessity, be on constant alert for the threats, right? It goes back to that fight or flight. But that's what we had to do in order to live, as we had to be on alert. We had to see the potential dangers coming. So our brain has been wired to see that negativity. And it requires that we step outward to notice the good, to notice the positive. And unfortunately, it's the same way in relationships. That oftentimes in relationships, we tend to see the negative over the positive. I want to show you this video. This is from Dr. John Gottman, who is really essentially, to me, the relationship guru. So if you are looking into more information on relationships, that's the first place I would probably go, is the Gottman Institute. But they talk about this 5-to-1 ratio when it comes to noticing good. So I want to show this to you guys. Yeah.
Ever wonder why some couples make it and others don't? Scientist Dr. John Gottman did. He spent 40 years studying thousands of couples to find out exactly what separates the relationship masters from the relationship disasters. Shakespeare compares love to a rose. Gottman uses a different metaphor, an emotional bank account. You know how a regular bank account works. So what's an emotional bank account? It represents the positive and negative balance in your relationship. The best couples maintain a high balance. Couples that break up are often in the red. You make deposits through positive interactions, and you withdraw through negative ones. What does a deposit look like? It's a simple act of showing your partner that you care for and support them. It's as easy as sending your partner a good luck text before a meeting or cooking them dinner after a long day. And pay attention when your partner shows you their admiration and support. Notice when they're investing in your relationship.
Thank you.
A withdrawal is either hurtful behavior toward your partner or ignoring their invitations to connect. But withdrawals and deposits don't have equal weight. In fact, Gottman found it takes 5 positive interactions to make up for 1 negative one. Happy couples maintain at least this 5-to-1 ratio. If you make constant deposits and keep your balance high, you're saving up for a rainy day when you'll need to cash in on that goodwill. Gottman notes that small daily deposits, like asking your partner how their day was, is far more important than the occasional over-the-top romantic gesture. Positivity leads to more positivity. This is not about keeping score. It's about investing in your relationship and your shared emotional bank account, moving from me to we. So keep your balance high by doing nice things every day and recognizing when your partner does them for you. You'll build up that emotional bank account in no time.
I personally like how they talk about how it is the little things, right? Those little daily deposits that we can offer that make the big difference. So the last thought I want to share is this idea on perspective. Again, I'm not a social media hater. Sounds like I am today, and maybe I am for today, but I think that an unfortunate side effect of social media is seeing just a small portion of what a relationship looks like. And oftentimes on social media, we're putting our best self on the screen, aren't we? And so we look at everybody else and we're like, man, their life is perfect. Man, they are the perfect couple. They must never argue or never fight. And we may not necessarily see what's really happening there, right? You don't have to answer these questions out loud, but I want you to think about these 3 questions up here. So for those of us dating, married, how many of us have ever had a bad attitude about our partner? I mean, I'll raise my hand on that one because I know that happens a lot at my house. The question being, next, how quickly can you get into that bad attitude? And then how quickly can you get out? I want to share, I share this story. I call it the analogy of the cup. I remember there was a particular class that I was teaching one night. And it was a little bit of a hop, skip, and a jump away. So my husband was home with the kids. And I got home from class. The class had gone really well. So I was really high spirits. I was excited to see my family and just to come home and to relax and enjoy the rest of my night. I pulled into the garage and I opened up our garage door that leads into our kitchen. And the first thing that I see is I see shoes all over the floor. So I kind of take a big sigh. All right, I'll take care of that in just a little bit. And then I I wander a little bit farther. And I see that the kids' homework is still sitting out on the counter, half done. Okay, I'll take care of that too. Don't worry. I keep walking throughout the house and I see there's messes, there's crumbs, there's leftover dinner. I am starting to get mad. And it was interesting because in a matter of minutes, I went from feeling fantastic to being real frustrated. And who was I frustrated at? I was frustrated at my husband. Come on, Brad. You know how long of a day I've had, and now I'm going to spend the next hour cleaning up your mess. And so for me, it was pretty quick to go from the positive to negative. Now, my husband has a habit. And his habit is when he wakes up in the morning, he takes out a glass of water and fills it up, takes a drink, and then when he's done, he puts it on the counter. And then he leaves it there because he knows that strategically he'll come back to it throughout the day, right? And there have been many, many instances where either the children or I have knocked that glass over. I haven't noticed it. I put my purse up on the counter, or I put the groceries up there, or the kids are playing, and I can't tell you how many times I have knocked over that cup and gotten mad. And there was one day when I blew up. I blew up on my husband and I said, "Put your cup away. I am so sick of cleaning up your mess." And my husband, being the calm person that he is, he said to me, "Do you know why I leave my cup out?" And in my head, I was thinking, well, yeah, because you're a mean, horrible, rotten person, right? That likes to cause me a lot of stress in life. And he said to me, "I know how busy you are. The last thing I want to do is give you more work. I don't want you to have to wash 7 cups throughout the day that I've used. So I use the same one. So there's only one at the end of the night rather than 7. And it was at that time, at that moment, when I realized he wasn't doing this to me as an inconvenience. He was doing it to me to help me. And so often in our relationships, we have a choice of what we can focus on. We can focus on the good and only the good. That's the goal. That's the aspiration. We would hope that we lived our life only seeing all the positive things that happen. But realistically, that's probably not the case. I think more so, we probably fall into this viewpoint where we see the good. Sometimes that bad sneaks in to an extent, and that's okay. That's natural. That's normal. We recognize that. We try to override that by giving more good. The danger lies when we get in this mindset where we focus only on the bad, the ugly. So going back to my previous story, I'm stomping through the house and I'm looking at the mess and I'm looking at the homework and I'm looking at the shoes, and I can hear my kids downstairs in the family room. So I stomp down the stairs, ready to start a battle with my hubby. And I noticed downstairs that they have built a blanket fort. And I can see the big fort that's been created. And then I can hear my husband and my kids inside the fort just giggling. And very quickly, once again, that bad attitude melted. And I realized just how lucky I was. And I think the point I want to get across is this right here. Who's in charge of our attitude? We are, guys. We have the power and control to decide how we're going to view things, what we're going to focus on when we're with our partner, when we're with our friends, when we're with our family members. This doesn't just relate to romantic relationships, but these are relationships in general. We're going to have roommates, we're going to have friends, we're going to have colleagues that are going to make some major mistakes. And that's a part of life. What is our focus going to be? What is our attitude going to look like? And who is in charge of changing that? So I'm almost out of time, but I want to issue you a challenge for today. This is your Valentine's Day challenge. This is a challenge that has been issued to us at Extension multiple times by our colleague, Dr. Dave Schramm. He does a lot of our professional development. And one of the things that he has challenged us in the middle of our professional development is he will say to us, all right, I want you to pull out your phones and I want you to text someone. Somebody on that contact list, whether that be a parent, whether that be a friend, whether that be a romantic partner, you decide who that person is. And I want you to send them a message right now, telling them that you appreciate them, that you love them, that you care for them, that you miss them, whatever you choose for that to be. And then as part of that professional development, we don't have time to do that here, but people have shared the responses they've gotten back from those texts, and they have been amazing responses. I made my son do it one day. I said, all right, I want you to text someone. Tell them that they're amazing. And this is my 13-year-old, mind you. This is my middle schooler who is very uncool, very too cool to do most things in life, right? I said, text somebody on there, assuming that he would probably text me or his dad, somebody that's, a really easy one to text. He texted one of his friends and he said, thanks for being my friend. And his friend texted him back and said, you're welcome. You're really cool. And I was like, how powerful was that for a 13-year-old to send that to another 13-year-old, to tell them, thanks for being my friend. So that would be my challenge for you guys today as we move forward. Think about those relationships that you have in your life. Think about those relationships that you want to build, to strengthen, maybe to even begin. And send out that text of appreciation to show them that you care. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you for spending your Valentine's Day with me. Any questions that I can answer before we close? On the Zoom as well, too.